Right now, as you watch this, there are men and women standing nearly 400 meters beneath the North Sea. Not in a submarine, not in a diving bell. They are standing on solid rock, in the dark, drilling a road. Above their heads sits enough water to swallow the Empire State Building whole, and it is pressing down on the rock around them at more than 500 pounds on every square inch. It is cold down there, it is loud, and the seawater never stops trying to get in. It finds the smallest crack in the stone, and it comes through, in jets, thousands of liters a minute, under a pressure that would knock a person off their feet. Nothing has collapsed, no one has drowned. The tunnel is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And that is the strange thing about this story, because the danger here is not that something has already failed. The danger is that every single meter they drill forward, the rock in front of them could be hiding a fault full of pressurized water they cannot see until they hit it. This is the deepest road ever attempted by human beings, and it is being built one careful blast at a time toward a point where only 50 meters of stone will separate the cars from the bottom of the sea. I'm Simon, and this is the story of Rogfast, the longest and deepest undersea tunnel in the world, and the quiet, relentless problem that could still undo the whole thing before it ever opens. To understand why anyone would build a road this far under the ocean, you have to start with the coastline itself, because western Norway is one of the most difficult places on Earth to simply get from one town to the next. The land is cut apart by fjords, long, deep arms of the sea that reach inland for miles between steep mountain walls. For most of Norway's history, the only way across those fjords was by boat. And even today, the main highway that runs up the western coast, the E39, connecting cities like Stavanger, Haugesund, and Bergen, is broken again and again by water. To drive that route, you don't just drive. You wait in line for a ferry, you load your car onto it, you cross, and you wait again at the next fjord. According to the Norwegian Public Roads Administration, crossing the country's western coast by that highway can involve stopping for one ferry after another, and the full journey between Stavanger and Bergen takes around 5 hours. For a region that produces a large share of the nation's wealth through fishing, shipping, and offshore energy, every one of those crossings is a delay, a cost, and a point where bad weather can shut the whole route down. So Norway made a decision that sounds almost impossible when you first hear it. It decided to eliminate the ferries, not some of them, all of them, along the entire western spine of the country, in a national project to make the E39 a road you can drive from end to end without ever stopping for a boat. Rogfast is the first and hardest crossing in that plan. Its name is short for Rogaland Fastforbindelsen, the Rogaland Fixed Link, and it will run beneath the Buknafjord to connect Randaberg, just north of Stavanger, to the island community of Bank. When it is finished, the Public Roads Administration says it will cut about 40 minutes off the drive and remove 2 ferry connections entirely. A trip that today depends on tides and timetables and the mood of the sea becomes a steady drive through rock. Now the obvious question, and it's the one I ask myself first, is why go under the water at all? Why not build a bridge? And the answer is the Boknafjord itself. It is wide and it is deep, deep enough that a bridge across it would push past the edge of what is practical, and it would stand fully exposed to the storms that come in off the North Sea. In this part of the world, a bridge is the fragile option. It is expensive to build across that span, expensive to maintain, and vulnerable to the exact weather that already makes the ferries unreliable. A tunnel bored through solid bedrock, by contrast, does not care about wind. It does not close in a storm. Once it is built, it simply works, day and night, in any weather, for a century or more. Norway happens to be the best place on the planet to make that argument, because the country has already built more than 40 subsea road tunnels, decades of them. It has quietly become the world's leading expert at driving roads beneath the sea, and engineers from other countries now travel to Norway to learn how it is done. Rogfast is what happens when a nation that good at something decides to attempt the hardest version of it that has ever existed. And the numbers on this one are genuinely difficult to hold in your head. The tunnel will run for 26.7 kilometers, a little under 17 miles, which alone makes it the longest subsea road tunnel in the world. But length is not the record that matters most here. At its deepest point, on the northern side beneath the fjord, the road will sit 392 meters below the surface of the sea. That is where the Empire State Building comparison comes from. You could stand that entire skyscraper up on the tunnel floor, and its roof would still be underwater. No road for cars has ever gone that deep. It will not be a single tube either. It is being built as two separate tunnels running side by side, roughly 15 meters apart, each one about 10.5 meters across, each carrying two lanes of traffic in one direction. Between them, at regular intervals, are cross connections, short passages linking the two tubes, so that if something goes wrong in one, people can escape into the other. And about halfway through, deep under the fjord, there is a detail that I still find slightly unbelievable: a roundabout. Actually, a double roundabout, more than 200 meters below the sea, where a branch tunnel splits off and climbs up to the island of Kvitsøy, the smallest municipality in Norway. It will be the deepest road junction ever carved out of rock, sitting somewhere in the range of 220 to 260 meters below the surface, an entire traffic circle blasted out of the seabed so that the people of an island with a few hundred residents can drive to the mainland whenever they like. The whole project is expected to cost around 25 billion Norwegian kroner, roughly $2.5 billion, and when it opens, it is expected to carry something like 13,000 vehicles every day. But before any of that can happen, the tunnel has to be dug, and this is where the calm engineering story starts to tighten. Because there are two ways to bore a large tunnel, and the choice between them here tells you exactly how dangerous this ground is. One way is a tunnel boring machine, a giant rotating cutting head that grinds forward continuously and lines the tunnel behind it as it goes. It is fast and it is smooth, and for Rogfast, the engineers decided against it. Instead, they are using what is called the Norwegian tunneling method, which is drill and blast. Crews drill a pattern of holes into the rock face, pack them with explosives, clear the area, and detonate. Then they haul out the broken rock, secure what is left, and move forward a few meters to do it all again. It is slower, it is louder, but it has one enormous advantage in ground like this: it lets you stop. When you are drilling and blasting, you can test the rock ahead of you before you commit to it, and if you find something you don't like, you can deal with it before it deals with you. A boring machine, once it is moving through bad ground full of high-pressure water, is far harder to save. So they chose the method that keeps a human decision between every blast and the sea. To understand what they are so carefully feeling their way through, you need to understand the rock under the Boknafjord. And according to the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute, which holds the independent contract to check the excavation, it is not one kind of rock at all. It is a patchwork laid down and twisted over hundreds of millions of years by volcanic activity, sediment, and the slow grinding of the Earth's crust. The tunnel passes through several distinct bands of stone, and between those bands lie fault zones, places where ancient movement has crushed and shattered the rock into weakness. Some of it is manageable. At the southern end there is phyllite, a dense, workable rock that is relatively predictable to dig through, even if it is close to useless as building material afterward. Further north, though, the tunnel runs into gneiss, and the gneiss is the problem. It is riddled with cracks, and those cracks hold enormous quantities of water under staggering pressure. One of the geologists working on the project put it plainly in an interview: the thing that could destroy the whole project is not the depth and not the length. It is the uncertainty of the geology. You do not fully know what is in front of you until you are almost in it. And there is one particular stretch that deserves its own warning, near Kvitsøy, where the branch tunnel climbs toward that island. The rock there includes graphite-rich black shale, and black shale has a nasty property. It is stable while it sits sealed inside the mountain, but expose it to air and water, which is exactly what tunneling does, and it can begin to break down and swell. It is the kind of ground that punishes you for disturbing it. So the picture you should have in your mind is not a clean bore through solid stone. It is a crew advancing through a shifting, uncertain patchwork, moving from predictable rock into fractured rock full of pressurized water, into shale that turns unstable the moment it meets the open air, never entirely sure which one is coming next. Now let's talk about the water, because this is the heart of it. Subsea tunneling has been described by the engineers doing it as a constant and ultimately unwinnable battle with the ocean, and I want to explain exactly what they mean, because it is not a metaphor. When you are hundreds of meters down, the sea above you is not just heavy, It is pressurized. Every fracture in the rock that connects upward toward the fjord is a channel holding water at that full crushing pressure, waiting. Down at Rogfast depths, that pressure reaches around 33 bar. If you have never worked with that unit, 33 bar is roughly 33 times the pressure of the atmosphere you are sitting in right now, and it is more than 500 pounds bearing down on every square inch. When a drill breaks into one of those water-filled fractures, the water does not trickle, it erupts. Crews on this project have reported inflows of up to 6,000 liters per minute pouring into the excavation through a single opening. That is thousands of liters a minute, arriving under a pressure that can hurl rock and equipment in a confined space with nowhere for it to go but around your boots. And the deeper they dig, the higher that pressure climbs. So how do you win a battle you have been told you cannot win? You don't try to, you manage it, and the main weapon is a technique called pre-grouting, which is one of those quiet, unglamorous ideas that entire projects live or die on. Before the crews blast into a new section, they drill a ring of long, thin holes out ahead of the tunnel face into the rock they are about to enter. Then they pump cement grout, a fluid slurry, into those holes under high pressure. The grout travels into the cracks and fissures in the rock ahead and hardens there, filling the pathways the water would have used. In effect, the crew seals the ground in front of them before they ever break into it, building a kind of waterproof shell out ahead of themselves and then digging into the space they have already sealed. It is slow, and it is repetitive, and it never entirely stops the water. High-capacity pumps run constantly to clear what does get through, but pre-grouting is the difference between water you can control and water that controls you, and at these depths, the crews do it again and again and again, hole after hole, for kilometers. And here is the part that turns this from a hard job into a genuinely nerve-wracking one. Rogfast is not being dug from one end to the other. To save years, it is being driven inward from both sides at the same time, with the aim of meeting somewhere in the middle beneath the fjord. According to reporting from MIT Technology Review, which sent a journalist down into the tunnel earlier this year, the construction company Skanska is driving in from the north, from the island side, and that northern stretch includes the deepest section of the entire tunnel, around 9 kilometers of it. From the south, out of Randaberg, a team led by the contractors Implenia and Stangland is boring the other way. 2 crews, kilometers apart, tunneling toward each other through a fractured, waterlogged, uncertain mountain with hundreds of meters of sea overhead. And they intend to meet with the 2 tunnels aligned to within about 5 centimeters, 2 inches, across kilometers of blind rock. To do that, they scan the tunnel with lasers multiple times a day, building what is essentially a live digital copy of the excavation so they can catch the tiniest drift in their direction before it becomes a miss. The 2 ends are expected to meet around 2029. Now, this project has already come close to dying once, and not from water. Construction began in January of 2018, and then, in late 2019, it stopped. The projected costs had run over, badly enough that the existing contracts were canceled and the entire project had to be restructured before it could continue. For about 2 years, the deepest tunnel in the world was a hole in the ground and an unanswered question. Work resumed in late 2021, and the completion date is now set for 2033. I point this out because it is easy, looking at a finished, record-breaking structure, to imagine its success was inevitable. It was not. This one nearly ended on a spreadsheet, years before the geology ever got its chance. And this is the moment in the story where I have to be honest with you about the thing that actually keeps tunnel engineers up at night, because it is not the water, and it is not the depth. It is fire. A long, deep subsea tunnel has a specific and unforgiving danger built into its shape. To get down under a fjord and back up the other side, the road has to descend steeply and then climb steeply, and Rogfast is designed with a maximum gradient of 5%. That does not sound like much, but for a heavily loaded truck, a long, steep climb means straining engines and hard-working brakes, and according to Norwegian research on the country's own tunnels, that combination is exactly what causes vehicle fires. The data here is stark. Studies of Norwegian road tunnels have found that subsea tunnels and tunnels with steep grades, which together make up only around 5% of the country's road tunnels by length, account for something on the order of 40% of the fires and serious incidents. The single strongest predictor of a heavy vehicle fire in that research is whether the tunnel is a subsea tunnel, In other words, the very design that lets Norway cross its fjords is also the design most prone to catching fire, and Rogfast is the longest and deepest one ever built. We already know what that can look like because it has happened. In 2015, in another Norwegian subsea tunnel called Skatestrom, a tanker truck carrying around 16,500 liters of petrol caught fire underground. According to Norway's Accident Investigation Board, the steep gradient of the tunnel let the burning fuel run down along the road surface, spreading the fire across a far greater length of the tunnel than anyone had planned for, and overwhelming the drainage that was supposed to carry it away. The investigators noted how brutally fast it escalated and how short the window was for anyone to get out. No one died in that fire, but the damage was severe, and it became a lesson written into how Norway now thinks about these tunnels, and into hard questions about what kind of cargo should be allowed through a place with only one way in and one way out. And it is the shadow standing behind every design decision at Rogfast. So the engineers built the answer into the shape of the tunnel from the start. This is why Rogfast is two separate tubes instead of one. If a fire breaks out in one tube, that tube can be sealed off and cleared of smoke while people escape sideways, through those cross-connection passages, into the parallel tube, which stays clean and becomes the escape route. The airflow is handled by what is called a longitudinal ventilation system, powered by jet fans mounted along the ceiling that push the air in a controlled direction down the length of the tunnel, so that smoke can be driven one way while people move the other. And to feed and control that air over such an enormous length, the project includes a vertical shaft rising up to the surface at Kvitsøy, the island in the middle, which doubles as a point where the tunnel can breathe. None of this makes a fire impossible. What it does is give the people inside something that the drivers in that 2015 tanker fire barely had, which is time, and a way out that does not depend on driving back up through the smoke. There is one more number worth sitting with before we close, and it is the amount of rock that has to come out of the ground to make all of this. The excavation is expected to produce on the order of 8.5 million cubic meters of broken stone. That rock does not simply vanish. Much of it, according to the project plans, is being used for land reclamation, shaping new usable ground along the coastline out of the mountain the crews are removing. The tunnel is not only a road being carved into the earth, it is, quietly, a small piece of new coastline being built out of the pieces. So let me bring this back to where we started, to those people standing in the dark under 400 meters of sea. When Rogfast opens, planned now for 2033, almost no one who drives through it will think about any of this. They will pass through a well-lit tube, take a gentle few minutes to cross beneath a fjord that once demanded a ferry and a long wait, and come out the other side having saved 40 minutes without ever really registering that at the lowest point of their drive, the entire North Sea was pressing down on the rock a short distance above the roof of their car. They will not feel the 33 bar of pressure in the fractures around them. They will not know that at one stretch, only 50 meters of stone stands between their tires and the bottom of the ocean, because Norwegian regulations demand at least that much rock cover between the tunnel and the seabed, for exactly the strength it provides against all that water. They will not think about the two crews who spent years tunneling blind toward each other, aiming to meet within 2 inches. That is the strange gift of great engineering. When it works, it makes the impossible feel boring. But it is not boring. It is one of the most difficult things human beings have ever tried to build, and as of today it is not finished, and it is not guaranteed. The two ends have not yet met. The deepest, most fractured, most pressurized rock still lies ahead of the crews on the northern side. Every meter forward is still a small act of faith that the pre-grouting held, that the fault ahead was found in time, that the ground is where the surveys said it would be. The sea has not stopped trying to get in, and it never will. It will still be leaning on that tunnel 100 years from now, patient, looking for the one crack nobody sealed. The whole achievement of Rogfast is not that it defeats the ocean. Nothing defeats the ocean. The achievement is that a group of people learned to hold it back one carefully sealed meter at a time, far enough and long enough to run a road through a place the water was always supposed to own. That is the job. That has always been the job. And somewhere under the Boknafjord tonight, in the cold and the dark and the noise, someone is doing it right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.